It was big.
Oh, wait. Why wouldn't you say that? And it sounded horrible. Okay, we're good to go. Hi, everyone. Adrian from Audio Accents Canada. Louis on my right and Christian behind the camera. I guess, first of all, we should just do some housekeeping. Today is December the 24th, 2022, Christmas Eve. Unfortunately, I have some bad news for those of you watching all over the world. I had to let Philip go recently. I didn't want to do it, but I won't get into the details. Suffice to say, we wish him the best for his future endeavors, and we will miss his insightful comments for the videos, but unfortunately, he could no longer work here. All right, let's move on. Today is the quote-unquote long-awaited video, first impressions of the Mofi SourcePoint 10 speakers. We did the unboxing last week, was it? Christian will put the link in the description box. And thank you guys for all the comments about how my two assistants here are incompetent when it comes to unboxing. It's absolutely true. One of the comments which was very useful is that I shouldn't just keep reading all of the technical specifications, so I won't. Christian will just throw up a graphic of all the different specifications. I also did a quick bio of the designer Andrew Jones, and if you want to know more, you can just watch the unboxing video. I went into a little bit of detail. Suffice to say, Mr. Jones is not a newcomer to the industry. He's extremely well-versed, very well-read, very knowledgeable, and has a lot of experience in designing speakers, decades and decades, which we will, it will become relevant in the second part of this part of the video. Just a couple of notes. The speakers are $36.99 US or $52.99 Canadian. Louis, why don't we start with the physical impressions, then we'll get to the sonics. What was your first impression when you were doing a bang-up job of the unboxing?
It was big. It's the biggest stand mount I have ever seen.
That is one big pile of shit.
Fit and finish is fantastic. And heavy.
Technically, it's not the biggest. I think the audio notes are bigger. Well, they're taller.
Taller, yeah.
But maybe not quite as deep, but taller.
Deep, yeah.
And wider as well, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's a very good looking speaker, regardless. The only caveat is that we don't have the proper stand for it.
That's coming.
Okay.
It's crazy that they would release a speaker that's a stand mount, but have no stands for it. Yeah, so that's one of the negatives we'll talk about. The stands are supposedly coming sometime in the early part of the new year, but we did manage to use an existing stand that we have from a company called Gershman. They made stand-mounted speakers 15, 16 years ago, and we were able to use their stands, which were, thank God, just the right height, 26 inches, which we'll get to. Anything else in your first impressions for the physical?
Well, actually, we don't really know what the proper stand, whether it's going to be angled or is it going to be straight.
Yeah, so we'll find out at some point.
Right.
It probably has to be straight because there's no mounting holes for the bottom of the speaker. But again, we'll get into the stands at some point.
Yeah, so the fit and finish is good. We have the walnut, which we are breaking in. And I have not seen the black, which we do have in stock. So when we start selling both, then we will open up and see the black.
My understanding is just black ash. It's not
black ash.
It's not like a high gloss piano or anything like that. It's just a black ash. Yeah.
Just from feedback to everybody likes how it looks.
Okay.
So
good. I would agree. It's a big stand mount speaker and very hefty. I specifically also like how the front baffle is designed, so you have this faceted look. If you don't know what I'm talking about, there are pictures on the website, on Mofi's website, and if you are familiar at all with the speaker called Avalon, it kind of looks like that. Okay, let's move on to the sound. So what do you think of the sound?
Okay, so the first foray in the speaker manufacturing and designer is Andrew Jones for Mofi. As Adrian has already spoken about Andrew Jones' credentials. I mean, it's so long we don't want to go in there. So I'll start. It's a very large stand mount, as Adrian said. It's not the largest, but for me, it's large. But we're still breaking them in, and we have put in over 100 hours for the first evaluation, which is today. Fit and finish, excellent. We've said that. Firstly, we're not using the stands which are recommended for them because we don't have possession of them as yet. As Adrian said, we will get them in the new year. The equipment used in the first testing and breaking them in was the Hagel 390, using their internal streamer. We also used the Audio Note Cobra, and with the Ineos Pulse attached to the Cobra. I played a variety of genres. Hey, Laura. The vocals I started off with was the Cowboy Junkies song Mining for Gold, and that was recorded in a church in Toronto. It's called the Trinity Session, so I guess it's done at the Trinity Church in downtown Toronto. It brought out and revealed an echo in the church, which honestly I have not heard in other speakers with the Hagel 390. So to me, that was quite pleasing because you know the recording is done in a church. Her voice, angelic, beautiful sound. I went on to play Adele, Hello. Adele's voice can sometimes be a bit pitched high for me, but it didn't come across as overly bright. To me, the voice was not overbearing. It played everything so far so good. I went to an older song, Tracy Chapman, Fast Car. It came out beautiful. Her voice is very smooth, and she has a beautiful mid-range. It came out beautiful on the SourcePoint. These speakers are really good. For bass and dynamics, which we often use these two tracks to get the dynamics out, somewhat fleshing out the bass and the treble. The first song I played was Too Many Zoos. Their song, The Warriors. A lot of bass, a lot of dynamics. Great expression of dynamics there. Treble, very smooth, not scratchy at all. Bass, a lot. For the room what we put them in, it's an AV room which is heavily damped, and we had no problems with the bass, no problems at all. Even though they claim it only goes down to, it's a 40 hertz cutoff. I somewhat believe it's lower than that. Maybe the designer and his specs maybe being very, very conservative. The other song which I played for great dynamics is Marson. The artist is Marson, and the track is Kashmir, which is a Led Zeppelin song, which is very favored among audiophiles, and we hear it so often. This guy plays an amazing guitar, and he's beating the guitar for some bass, and as well as strumming the guitar. You could hear the strings, the vibration of the strings. So the dynamics was just fantastic. And everyone who came in and heard it even said that it's better than the Led Zeppelin track. So, hey, Led Zeppelin, I'm sorry. But also, the center image is fantastic. And whether you stand to the left of the speaker or to the right of the speaker, you get the same amount of treble dispersion, which is very clean, not scratchy, well done. I won't say what people who have heard it, clients who have heard it, what their comments would be. But
wait. Why wouldn't you say that?
Well, no, I'm coming there. Also, what one person who heard it first said to me, "Is this a $10,000 speaker?" I'm going, "No, it's half of that, basically. It's 5,300 Canadian," and they were shocked. Also, on one day, we had one guy from Montreal and one guy from Toronto at different times come in, and they both said they had Harbeth speakers at home. Not trying to knock Harbeth at all, but they said these sounded better than their Harbeth at home. And they had good electronics too. So I don't know if that magical combination of the Hagel 390 and the SourcePoint 10 is just something which is fantastic and it just goes well. Also, because of that, when other customers come in to look at the Hagel, and we're promoting Hagel, we had the SourcePoint 10 playing, and I would just ask them, and they comment how good the speaker sounded. I would say, "How much do you think this cost?" And there was nobody who said that those speakers are under $10,000. And that is something which in our store here is remarkable, because we have, very high-end products in here. And for someone to comment to me on something which is that cost and thinking it's twice the cost, I think it's a very, very good,
Okay. So basically you didn't like them.
Oh, I will save that for last after you're finished.
Okay, all right. So we'll start with those impressions first. So generally, I would say I agreed with Louis. Let me just fill in some blanks first. As I think I said in the unboxing video, if I didn't, I'll say it now. I generally don't represent a product until I've actually had some experience with it, and I've gone through my checklist of things that I always go through, and I'm very sure that I think that the speakers are what I want to represent. Because at the end of the day, number one, we already have a wide range of products. We have very few holes that I want to fill, and I'm very careful about what I want to represent. It has to be something that I really, really like. If I don't, I'm not interested. And besides the fact that I have to really like it, there has to be a whole bunch of other things. Like I know that it's well made, that I know that the suppliers are going to be able to support the product in case of problems and so on. So I go through a very long checklist. This is an unusual scenario, but there are caveats. I bought them sight unseen. I agreed to be a dealer without hearing them, but there's a reason for it. I had known about Andrew Jones for a very long time. We've represented his previous products. I've heard his previous products at many consumer electronics shows, even ones that we were not a dealer for. So, for example, he designed these incredible TAD speakers. TAD is a professional division of Pioneer, and the speakers at the time started from the little micro ME1s, which were about $20,000, all the way up to hundreds of thousands of dollars. And every time I heard them at CES, I was always so pleasantly impressed with the speakers. And then I found out, of course, that Andrew Jones was the designer, so I got to know him, and I would every single time go up after a presentation and shake his hand and tell him what a great job he did. So I knew his capabilities. And then, of course, he went to ELAC, and we became an ELAC dealer, and the Unify series represented some of the better values out there. So when Mofi said that they had hired Andrew Jones about a year or so or 2 years ago, I thought, great, I'm sure he will make great speakers. And so when the speakers became available, I immediately ordered some. I wasn't concerned that they wouldn't sound good. So that's the reason why we became a dealer. So sonically, like Louis said, very nice authority in dynamics. One of the things that is very important to me from a sonic standpoint is that the speakers have to be lively and dynamic and engaging. If the speakers are very neutral but very boring, in other words, there's no dynamics whatsoever, the soft and loud sounds all seem to be sort of at the same volume or sort of compressed, then very quickly I lose interest. Nice coherence. You don't hear separate drivers. There are speakers which I won't name that are very well known that you can hear the highs and they're very brilliant, and then if you realize that the mid-range is not as clear and not as articulate, that's one sense of coherence. You're missing that. With these speakers, don't hear that at all. They're very coherent. As Louis also pointed out, the image is very sharp. All you have to do is just sit down in the center and you instantly hear a very, very sharp, very nicely defined center image. And not only that, the center image is not just a little point. So there are lots of speakers on the market which throw a beautiful soundstage and a beautiful image, but the image is a little point in space. And for me, and this is personal, I don't like that. The moment that I hear a little point in space, there's a part of my brain that says that's not real, because you're not a point in space. You have a dimension, rightly or wrongly, whether it's accurate as far as the source is concerned or the microphone technique. I'm not debating that point. I'm just simply saying that if the illusion is basically a little point in space, I'm done. You've lost me at that point. And that's why if you ever visit us in the store, you'll notice that the way that I set up the speakers, I don't try to set up a little point in space. I try to set it up so that you have a bit of dimension. And these speakers do that. They do have a dimension in the center image. Soundstage is wide, but, and this is the first of the caveats, it appears that the soundstage is only about as wide as the speakers are as wide. So in other words, there are other speakers that throw a bigger illusion, cone speakers even. There will be some others that have a soundstage which seems to extend beyond the width of the speakers. So far, these don't seem to do that for me. Now, as Louis pointed out, these are about 100, 150 hours or so break-in, maybe a little bit more when I think about it. But regardless, it probably can still do with a little bit more. But that's one of the things I noticed. And soundstage depth was very good. I played a number of classical pieces. I forgot to put the names of those pieces in my notes, but I could easily get very nice soundstage depth. The speakers are currently set up in our room with the back of the speaker approximately 3.5 feet from the front wall. But I could easily hear dimensions of depth that went way past the wall. Very, very good micro and macro dynamics. I mentioned earlier they're very good with dynamics. So there are two types. There's the difference between very loud and very soft, and then there's everything in between, the micro. And so when you play piano or guitar, you can hear very easily the little gradations that the musician is doing. I won't bore you with all my musical recommendations or playlists that I usually give you. Louis has already given you some. Suffice it to say, I had no difficulty enjoying the speaker. It was wonderful. Oh, by the way, so Louis had in fact hooked up the H390, and then when I listened to the speakers periodically when they were breaking in because I was very, very curious. A few days ago, a gentleman came in to buy a set of Macintosh preamp and amp, right? The C53 and the MC312. And so I think Louis had hooked them up to the speakers. So I popped my head in while Louis was doing something else in the front. I popped my head in to see what it sounded like. And I was going, wow, this sounds really good. Not only did it have the Macintosh traditional sort of warmth, although not in this case really warm, but it had speed and dynamics and clarity and transients, and it was wonderful. I was actually very tempted to tell the guys, let's hook up Macintosh to this. This sounds wonderful. And then when it came time for me to actually do my listening, I saw that the 390 was hooked up, so I listened initially to the 390, and then I thought, these speakers are $5,400, yeah, $5,300 Canadian. What if I use an amplifier that was much less expensive? So I hooked up the H120 Hagel, which is what, about $2,500, 3,000, something like that. The guys will throw the price on. Yeah, the guys will throw the price on it. I don't know what it costs, but I know it's a lot less expensive than the 390. And I tell you what, I was very happy with that combination. Sure, not quite as refined, not quite as good as the H390, and you don't expect it for the difference in cost. But it goes to show that, number one, with these speakers, they're so transparent that they can easily make use of much better electronics like the combo of the Macintosh or the Hagel H390 or the Hagel H120. And that's because the speakers are very easy in terms of the impedance and the sensitivity is high. And then, of course, I hooked up the Cobra because I was very curious. And here's the other reason why I wanted to pick up these speakers. As you know, we became an audio node dealer a little while ago. And if you don't know, go look at our unboxing video for a laugh. One of the things about audio node is that as you go up higher in their levels, in other words, the higher the level, the better the amplifier, the lower the power. So at the higher levels, they put out 3 watts, 5 watts, 8 watts, that kind of thing. So very low power. And there are very few speakers in the world that will play properly with such low power. And so I was very curious to see if these would work with the similar priced audio node amplifiers. And the Cobra is about $8,000. It's about 20 watts pure class A with an integrated DAC built in. And I tell you what, it sounds marvelous. All of the things that we talked about the Cobra in our review, which they'll link in the description box, I got all of that. Maybe not quite as emotional as the audio node ED speakers that are $8,000 or $9,000. Maybe not quite as emotional, but I didn't miss that much. On the other hand, I got quote-unquote audiophile stuff. I got imaging. I got soundstage. I got depth. I got speed. I got clarity, and so I was very, very happy to know that the Cobra could do it. Did you hear that as well? Yeah. So I was really, really happy with that. Okay, so let's talk about the bad. So we talked about the good. Let's talk about the bad. Go ahead. Come on, don't tell me you didn't find anything bad, because you're an amateur again.
Well, the only thing I'm waiting to see is the stand, whether it's going to be straight or angled. I really don't know, because the test which another YouTuber had done was using the Wharfdale Linton stands, which is angled. So, and the speaker, basically the bottom of the speaker would rest against the support of that. So,
well, in the pictures that I saw at the where was the show they were debuted at?
Capitol Audio Fest in Washington.
Just if I remember, it just appeared to be 4-post metal stands that were flat at the top. It appeared to look like that. I don't think the speakers were tilted back.
Tilted back, okay.
So I don't think so. So that's your only negative. They did not come up with the stand at the same time.
Yeah, by the way, I agree. That's a real big negative, because
what a faux pas.
Yeah, because the stands what we are using are not as wide as the speaker.
Let me talk about that. So there are a few caveats, a few things to be aware of. Number one, these speakers do need a bit of work. They're not speakers like audio notes where you basically stick them near the wall, angle them in if you want, and basically you're done. These speakers, like a lot of other speakers, you do need to take some care, because they do go down quite low. And not only do they go down low, as Lewis was pointed out, they go down low with meat.
Yeah.
There are speakers on the market where, if you measure them, they go low, but there's no effortlessness. There's no meat on the bone, so to speak. These do. They go low and they produce energy. So you got to make sure that you set up the speakers properly. And number two, they do need to be towed in. I noticed that I was playing with them. When you don't angle them in, the image is not as sharp, and when you tow them in, you get much better clarity. So it appears that maybe the high frequency dispersion might be
too directional.
A little bit too direct, yeah. And it could be the waveguide, because they use the woofer as part of the waveguide. So I did notice that. I also noticed that as a slight negative, and I hasten to say slight, the mid-range voice area, especially male voices, could sound a little bit hooded. In other words, a little bit not as clear as perhaps I want it to be. And in the upper high frequencies, so for example, from about 6-7 kilohertz and up, not quite as airy as I'm used to. Now, I hasten to also again say, I'm used to, really great speakers. And so I'm wondering, as I'm thinking about this, is this a fair a comparison? And in the next impressions video that we'll do on this, assuming we remember to do so. We'll compare with other speakers that we have in this price point. But suffice to say, I miss a bit of that airiness that we get, well, even from Magnepan. The LRSs sound brilliantly open.
Yeah.
There's this wonderful transparency that I kind of miss. But they're very different speakers, I hasten to say. What are the negatives? Oh, same with vertical dispersion. And I started off by saying you need to make sure that the stands are of the right height. When we first got it, we have a pair of 4-post metal stands, which are roughly about 20 inches or so. We put them on and didn't sound right. The voices, as I've often said, sounded like munchkins. They're like short little people. And it sounded horrible. And the moment that we got them on the right height, they sound great. For those of you who don't want to wait, Target Audio makes 4-post stands, which are 28 inches tall, and those will work fine. Or you can wait for Mofi to put out their own stands. And the Target ones are $879 or something like that, but they're very heavy. Oh, here it is, $879, yeah, Canadian. I don't know what it is in the States. 4-post metals, they are 39 pounds each.
Yeah,
they're heavy. So don't get stands that are too low. The image will be too short. And the last negative is size. Basically, that they're physically quite big. Okay. Any other negatives that we should talk about?
It's to me, the size is huge. It's huge.
It's like a small fridge.
Yes.
It's like the size of the fridge that we have in our kitchen.
The beer fridge, as my son would say, his beer fridge in his room. Overall, the sound makes it more positive than a negative.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
The good thing too, this is not the negative, this is really good, because I've not heard one customer who have heard it, not one, didn't like it.
Yeah. And by the way, just so you know, our clients are usually friends. They are not hesitant in telling us when something sucks. Trust me.
Yeah, but seriously, I have not had one negative comment. Yeah. Even with the size, they didn't comment. Maybe it's not for them, though. So, but sound-wise, they were quite pleased. I have not found a negative so far from clients. And I think that's the best feedback to take.
Well, to be fair, we talk a lot about the size, so let's just talk about why they have to be that size. So here's the reason why. Part of the design brief, as far as Andrew Jones was concerned, was that they were going to use a 10-inch woofer. Well, when you use a 10-inch woofer, then the width of your cabinet has to, at the very least, be 10 inches. Can't be smaller, number one. Number two, if you want a speaker to go low in frequency, you either have a larger cabinet or you use drivers that are very lossy, but then you will have to use a lot more power or whatever the case may be. In other words, everything is a compromise. You choose your compromises. So he chose his. So the cabinet is wider, is quite deep, and it's relatively tall. But the upside is when you do get that bass coming out, it's full bass. It's not thin little, string only kind of bass. It actually has energy. When you play cello, which I did multiple times, it felt like a cello. In fact, one of our good friends, Vincent, he's the musical ambassador for Audio Note, and I've heard him play cello multiple times. As a matter of fact, when he came and visited the last time, right, he brought his cello in and he played a concert right in front of us. It was insane how good it sounded, and it was great to see it live 5 feet away. And when you play it through those speakers, it has that kind of weight of a cello. So it's physically large for those reasons. Also,
one of your favorite tracks is the Christian McBride.
Yes.
And it had no problem reproducing the dynamics of that song. Yeah. You could hear the bow on the bass. It was amazing. And even the gentleman yesterday commented how good it was. Yeah. Even though he was here to buy.
Yeah, he bought a small bookshelves because his credenza, his custom built-in, only had a certain size, and the speakers had to be white. That was very important.
Yes.
And so he ended up buying the Apertura swings. Have you seen any videos at all about these speakers?
Micro, macro,
Wow, that's the reason?